He chose the weakest-looking prisoner from the tribute vault, expecting a quiet servant to ease his post-war exhaustion. Instead, he got Zara, who corrected his grammar within minutes and questioned human courtship rituals over terrible coffee. Now their frontier colony is about to face pirate raiders, and Marcus is realizing his mercy might have been the most strategically brilliant mistake of his life. The victory feast tasted like synthetic protein and regret, which Marcus Chen supposed was fitting. Around him, soldiers celebrated with the kind of desperate energy that comes from surviving when better people didn't. The mess hall buzzed with talk of territorial claims and war spoils. But Marcus just watched his coffee cool in its mug. Admiral Barnes took the podium, his uniform crisp where everyone else's showed wear. He announced the tribute distribution with the flat delivery of a man reading inventory reports. Weapons from the alien arsenals, technology cores, prisoners of war. Each option carried different weight, different futures. Most soldiers headed straight for the shiny things, plasma rifles that could melt through bulkheads, data cores humming with unknown science. They chose power, or what looked like power. Marcus watched a corporal nearly drop a gravity rifle while trying to show off its settings. Post-conflict psychology suggests that after extreme trauma, people often make choices based on compassion rather than tactical advantage. The mind seeks to balance scales in personal ways that don't always match strategic priorities. Marcus didn't know the research, but he felt its truth in his bones. Barnes explained the prisoner option last. Taking one meant full responsibility. Feeding them, housing them, their life bound to your path from that moment forward. No transfers, no returns. The containment fields hummed at the hall's far end, holding figures that ranged from intimidating to barely conscious. Marcus walked past the obvious prizes. The warrior type stood proud behind their energy barriers, sizing him up like they were still choosing rather than being chosen. He stopped at the last cell. The alien inside looked fragile, all slender limbs and downcast eyes. The kind of prisoner you'd take because they seemed like they'd need protection. Between you and me, mercy has a funny way of rewriting the rules of war when you least expect it. He signaled his choice to the guard, who gave him a look that said this was probably a bad idea. The containment field dissolved, and Marcus offered a hand he didn't expect to be taken. He'd made what he thought was the kind choice, the easy choice. He had no idea he'd just made the most strategically significant decision of his life, or that the delicate-looking woman would soon be correcting his grammar with unsettling calm. The containment field hissed open with the sound of escaping pressure and ozone. The woman inside didn't look like any prize Marcus had ever seen. She stood maybe 5 feet tall, limbs so slender they seemed like they might break under the weight of her own plain gray tunic. He expected tears, maybe gratitude, the kind of desperate relief he'd seen in refugees. Instead, she met his gaze directly. Her eyes weren't frightened, they were assessing. "You speak standard?" she asked, her voice carrying an odd musical quality that flattened the vowels in a way no human could quite manage. Marcus blinked. "Yes, Good," she cut him off. "The accent is thick, but I'll manage." She stepped past him without waiting for permission, her movements fluid where he'd expected weakness. "The binding terms require I accompany you, correct? Your quarters or communal housing?" He stared at her. Prisoners of war weren't supposed to sound like they were conducting efficiency reviews. "My quarters, for now." She nodded, already scanning the corridor layout with what looked like professional interest. "A little cramped," she observed. The structural reinforcement patterns suggest haste rather than planning, typical of human military construction. Research into cross-cultural encounters shows that what appears as vulnerability often masks highly adaptive intelligence. Organisms that seem fragile frequently develop compensatory skills, pattern recognition, social manipulation, strategic deference. The woman wasn't cowering because she'd never needed to. Marcus found himself trying to explain security procedures to someone who kept correcting his terminology. "The biometric scanner requires thermal and capillary response confirmation, yes," she finished. "Crude but effective for your level of technology." She gave him a look that was almost amused. "You humans like things complicated, don't you?" That word, complicated, hung between them. She'd said it like it was a clinical observation about an interesting species trait, not a complaint. Marcus felt the first cold trickle of doubt. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. The grateful prisoner, the merciful soldier, those were the roles. Not this. Whatever this was becoming. He'd chosen the weakest-looking option specifically to avoid complications. Now he had someone who analyzed structural engineering while barely glancing at it, who spoke standard with the precision of a diplomat and the confidence of someone who knew exactly how much she was supposed to know, which he was starting to suspect was considerably more than any prisoner should. Marcus realized two things in quick succession. First, that this was probably the stupidest decision he'd ever made, and second, that strength had nothing to do with physical appearance. Her intelligence wasn't just knowledge, it was a reshaping force, something that made the world bend around it without seeming to try. Then she tilted her head, all that sharp assessment softening into what looked like genuine curiosity. "Do you have coffee here?" "I've read about it. The description suggests it's either terrible or wonderful with nothing in between." The question was so ordinary, so human in its way, that it caught him completely off guard. Here was this unnervingly perceptive alien who just deconstructed military architecture with a glance, asking about breakfast beverages like a tourist. Nothing was ever simple again after that coffee question. It was the first crack in the wall between them. The moment he realized she wasn't just intelligent, she was playful with it, capable of shifting from technical analysis to cultural curiosity without missing a beat. She'd already redefined what strength looked like, and she'd done it before they'd even left the docking bay. The transport ship's coffee tasted like recycled engine coolant with a hint of ozone, but Zara drank it anyway. She took small, measured sips, her eyes tracking the movement of crew members through the cramped mess hall. Marcus had expected a quiet companion, someone who'd stay in the background and follow orders. He hadn't expected a field researcher disguised as a prisoner. "Your replication systems struggle with organic compounds," she observed, setting the cup down precisely. The bitterness suggests chemical extraction rather than proper brewing. Efficient but not pleasurable. It wasn't a complaint, more like a technician noting an interesting design flaw. Then she started asking about courtship rituals. Not military protocols or defense systems, human romantic customs. "Your media suggests gift-giving establishes bonding intent. Is this accurate? Do the objects hold symbolic value, or is the act itself the signal?" Marcus tried to explain flowers. Zara listened with the intense focus of someone memorizing tactical data. "So organic matter with temporary viability represents emotional commitment. The fragility implies risk. Interesting risk assessment model." She noticed patterns he'd never considered. How human technology favored function over aesthetics except in personal relationships. How military rank structure mirrored certain social hierarchies but opposed others. Her questions felt like she was mapping human behavior through these small, seemingly random topics. Cross-cultural research shows that alien observers often misinterpret social rituals by applying their own frameworks. They see strategic calculations where humans see emotion, or practical solutions where humans see tradition. Zara was doing something else. She was seeing both at once, understanding the emotional weight and the structural purpose simultaneously. Her charm was the disarming kind. She'd follow a technical observation with a perfectly timed, humorous remark that made Marcus forget she wasn't human. The power dynamic he'd expected, soldier and prisoner, was dissolving into something closer to colleagues. Or something stranger. Marcus felt his suspicion warring with raw curiosity. Who was she really? No prisoner from a defeated species should have this calm, this analytical distance. She asked about wedding traditions while noting the ship's structural weaknesses out of the corner of her eye. She discussed gift-giving rituals while mentally calculating load-bearing tolerances. The payoff came when she described her own culture's bonding practices. Not with pride or nostalgia, but with the wry amusement of someone comparing technical specifications. "We use neural resonance patterns. More efficient, less ambiguous. But you humans, you enjoy the uncertainty, don't you? The not knowing." In that moment, Marcus saw it. The extraordinary intellect operating through ordinary questions. She wasn't just gathering data. She was understanding them. Their fears, their joys, their terrible coffee. Her vulnerability wasn't weakness, it was methodological. A way to see deeper by appearing less threatening. Meanwhile, her fingers traced the edge of the table, mapping the joinery. Her eyes tracked the emergency lighting circuits along the ceiling. She noted the placement of fire suppression systems and the thickness of the hull plating at their section. Every question about human emotion was balanced by silent analysis of structural engineering. She was memorizing the ship's layout not to escape, but to understand. To see how it worked, where it was strong, where it was weak. And Marcus, watching her sip that awful coffee while she unraveled human social structures, realized she was doing the same thing to him. To all of them. Life on Kepler 442b was supposed to be simple. If you ignored the environmental control failures, the flickering power grids, and the medical scanners that gave readings about as reliable as weather predictions, Marcus noticed Zara spending more time with technical manuals than anything else. She'd sit in the common area with maintenance logs spread around her like some strange card game, her fingers tracing circuit diagrams with absent focus. The environmental control system had failed 3 times that month. Each time the colony's mechanics spent hours rerouting power, replacing filters, muttering about incompatible alien technology. Then Marcus noticed something odd. The system only ever failed when Zara wasn't nearby. When she sat in the greenhouse section reading her manuals, the air purification hummed along perfectly. When she moved to the comms hub, that section's temperature regulation stabilized. She called human engineering philosophy instructive once, with the careful tone of someone choosing words to avoid offense. You build redundant systems but underutilize them. Safety protocols limit function to 30% of capacity. A curious choice. Her repairs started small. A medical scanner in the infirmary had been giving erratic readings for weeks. Zara spent 20 minutes with it, tapping the screen in patterns that didn't match any calibration sequence Marcus knew. The device started working with precision nobody remembered it having. The comm system's static cleared up after she adjusted the alignment during a routine check. The mechanics wrote it off as lucky coincidences. Research into technical intuition shows that some individuals perceive system patterns in ways that defy conventional learning. They see not just how things work, but how they should work, the potential hidden beneath safety limits and design compromises. They don't follow repair manuals so much as converse with machinery. Colony efficiency metrics told the real story. Power consumption dropped 15% while output increased. Water reclamation rates improved. Medical diagnostics showed higher accuracy across all units. The improvements weren't dramatic, just steady, system-wide tweaks that added up to something significant. The quartermaster thought they'd finally broken in the new equipment. Marcus found her in the sensor array room one evening, recalibrating long-range scanners with a tool she shouldn't have known how to use. The device was military-grade, required specific security clearance just to touch. She held it with the comfortable familiarity of someone using a kitchen utensil. The harmonics were off by 0.03%, she said without looking up, enough to miss small vessels at extreme range. She made another adjustment. The display screen sharpened, showing cleaner readings at the outer detection limits. That's when Marcus understood. Her intelligence wasn't some abstract quality, it was operational, practical. She wasn't showing off or proving anything. She was simply making things work better because she couldn't stand to see them functioning below their potential. The environmental systems, the medical equipment, the comm arrays, they were all running smoother because Zara treated imperfection like a personal insult. The payoff was gradual, but undeniable. Their frontier colony, which had been stumbling along at marginal efficiency, was becoming something else. Something reliable, something capable. Zara's mind wasn't ornamental, it was infrastructure. She was quietly upgrading their entire operational reality through 100 small, precise interventions that nobody noticed until they worked. But between you and me, operating at 30% efficiency was never going to last around someone who saw wasted potential in every system. She didn't fix things because she wanted credit. She fixed them because broken things offended her sense of how the universe should work. And Marcus was starting to realize that her sense of how things should work was considerably more advanced than theirs. The alarm screamed through New Geneva's corridors, 3 raider ships approaching fast. Marcus ran toward the command center, mentally calculating their defensive capabilities. They had 2 aging turrets, a shield grid that flickered under stress, and maybe 24 soldiers with standard-issue rifles. Against pirate raiders, that meant they'd hold for 10 minutes if they were lucky. Zara wasn't running. She stood in the doorway of their habitation pod, sipping what passed for tea in the colony. "Try not to shoot anything important," she said as Marcus rushed past. Her calm was unnerving. She might as well have been watching weather patterns. The raider ships didn't match any known configuration. Their design blended industrial mining rigs with military-grade weapon mounts. Science and violence fused into something brutal and efficient. Frontier colonies like theirs weren't equipped for this. Standard defense protocols assumed pirates would be disorganized, poorly armed. These ships looked like they'd been built for systematic stripping of settlements. Military history shows that overwhelming force tends to succeed against isolated outposts. The mathematics of conflict are simple. Better weapons, better coordination, and numbers usually win. New Geneva had none of those advantages. Their shield emitters were salvage. Their targeting systems were generations behind. On paper, this wasn't a battle. It was a foreclosure. The lead raider ship painted their defense turrets with targeting locks. Marcus watched the screens, waiting for the first impact. It never came. The weapons locked on, held for 3 seconds, then disengaged. The second ship's navigation display glitched, coarse projections scattering across the screen like broken glass. Comms filled with static, a harsh white noise that drowned out the raiders' transmissions. The pirates tried to reroute, to bypass whatever was interfering. Their ship shuddered, vectors shifting erratically. One of them fired a test shot that went wide. Not just missed, but curved away from the colony as if repelled by an invisible field. The raiders circled, weapons cycling through targeting sequences that never quite completed. Navigation systems showed conflicting data. False obstacles, ghost signals, orbital paths that didn't match reality. After 5 minutes of this, the lead ship broke off. The others followed, engines flaring as they retreated faster than they'd arrived. No demands, no communication, no damage except to their pride. They left like they'd encountered something that broke their understanding of physics. Marcus stood in the suddenly quiet command center, staring at the empty scopes. The defense systems showed normal readings now. No errors, no glitches, just the steady hum of equipment functioning perfectly. That's when he understood. Zara hadn't been hiding in the hobby. She hadn't been afraid or indifferent. She'd been working. Her quiet upgrades, the tweaks to sensors, the recalibrated comm arrays, the adjustments to power routing, hadn't just improved efficiency. They'd created a defensive network that worked in ways nobody anticipated. The pirates hadn't faced guns or shields. They'd faced a system that falsified their sensor data, jammed their targeting, and convinced their computers that attacking was impossible. Zara hadn't built a wall. She'd built a hall of mirrors. Then Marcus realized the tea she'd been drinking wasn't tea at all. It was coolant from the primary server rack, and she'd been monitoring the entire engagement through a makeshift interface she'd wired into the HAB's environmental controls. She hadn't just upgraded their defenses. She'd become them. Back in the HAB, Zara sat with technical manuals spread across the floor, her fingers tracing schematics like they were ancient poetry. The pages showed maintenance protocols for equipment that wasn't supposed to be user-serviceable, but she studied them with the focus of someone reading sacred texts. Marcus stood in the doorway watching her for a moment before stepping inside. "You want to tell me what happened with the pirates?" he asked. The command center was still buzzing with confused reports about systems behaving in ways nobody could explain. Zara looked up, her expression calm. "The targeting systems needed recalibration. I made some adjustments." She said it like someone mentioning they'd watered the plants. He pressed. The raiders' weapons locked on but didn't fire. Their navigation glitched. Their comms jammed. "That's not calibration. That's something else." She closed the manual she'd been reading. "Safety protocols limit your systems to 30% efficiency. The manufacturers build in margins to prevent user error. I've been bypassing some of those limitations. Engineering studies confirm that safety margins often hide significant performance potential. Systems designed for civilian or military use typically operate far below their theoretical maximums, not because they can't handle higher loads, but because the manufacturers assume users will make mistakes." The equipment on New Geneva had been running at about 30% capacity, wasting resources and capability that were technically present but intentionally restricted. Zara demonstrated with the environmental control unit. She showed how a simple software patch she'd written rerouted power from redundant systems that were never used, how adjusting the calibration of the shield emitters by less than 1% dramatically increased their coverage, how the waste heat from the power generators, which had been vented into space, could now be channeled to reinforce defensive screens. Small adjustments cascade, she explained. The targeting computers talk to the navigation arrays. The shield generators communicate with power distribution. When you improve one system slightly, the others respond proportionally. She made it sound simple, like tuning an instrument rather than rewriting their entire defensive infrastructure. Her line about the defenses being slightly more effective became the understatement of the century. The raiders hadn't just encountered improved targeting, they'd faced a system that could falsify sensor data, jam communications, and manipulate navigation computers into seeing obstacles that didn't exist. The colony's systems were now conversing with each other in ways the original designers never intended, creating emergent capabilities that nobody could have predicted. The payoff arrived when Marcus checked the colony's status reports. Power efficiency had increased 40%. Sensor range had doubled. Defensive coverage now extended 3 times farther than specifications allowed. Medical scanners showed accuracy rates previously considered impossible. Zara hadn't just fixed things. She'd unlocked hidden potential in every system she touched, turning their collection of barely functional equipment into something that defied conventional engineering principles. Her admission revealed she'd been upgrading their entire civilization from the margins, one maintenance manual at a time. She treated their technology like a conversation rather than a set of instructions, asking what it could do rather than what it was supposed to do. The improvements weren't dramatic singular changes, but hundreds of tiny adjustments that multiplied each other's effects, which meant their quiet frontier colony, which had been struggling to maintain basic life support, had quietly become a fortress that could disable advanced warships without firing a shot. The raiders thought they were attacking a vulnerable outpost. What they found was a system that had been awakened to its true potential by someone who read technical manuals, like they contained secrets rather than instructions. 3 starships materialized from warp space, their configuration unlike any vessel in human databases. Sleek silver hulls tapered to needle points, with engine signatures that read more like energy waveforms than propulsion systems. Marcus reached for the alarm, assuming another attack. Then the comm channel chimed with a request for diplomatic landing protocols, polite, precise, and utterly confusing. Zara stopped mid-sentence in her explanation of soil pH balancing. Her usual calm shifted into something else, not alarm, but recognition. She studied the main view screen with the focus of someone identifying a familiar vehicle in a parking lot. "Don't shoot," she said quietly. "They're here for me." The lead ship carried imperial markings that shouldn't mean anything to a frontier colony. Swirls of platinum and cobalt formed patterns that looked like mathematical equations frozen in metal. Their communication used encryption levels beyond human capabilities, not just complex, but fundamentally different in how information was structured and verified. Diplomatic studies confirm that first contact protocols vary dramatically across civilizations. Some species announce themselves with grandeur. Others test defenses first. The Altarians used formal precision, every word measured, every protocol observed with exacting attention to detail. They weren't just being polite. They were demonstrating technological superiority through perfect adherence to rules humans didn't yet understand. The delegation that stepped onto the landing pad wore robes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They moved with the unison of people who shared neural links. Their leader ignored Marcus completely, his gaze finding Zara immediately. "We seek the chief scientist," he announced in flawless standard. The title carried weight, capital letters implied in the pronunciation. Zara stepped forward without hesitation. She still wore her stained work trousers and a shirt that had coffee drips down the front. The contrast between her casual appearance and the delegation's formality was almost comical. "I'm here," she said. "The science directorate sent you, I assume." The Altarian leader bowed precisely 15 degrees. "Your absence caused disruptions." Understatement seemed to be a diplomatic tool. Research suggests that advanced civilizations often use subtle language to convey significant problems without causing alarm. 3 star systems threatened secession. The military council demanded retaliatory strikes. The directorate has been non-functional without your oversight. Marcus stared at her. Chief scientist. Not prisoner. Not refugee. The person who designed entire fleet propulsion systems, whose absence could trigger interstellar conflicts. The delicate-looking woman who'd been fixing their coffee makers and reading technical manuals for fun. Then the second Altarian removed his hood. His features shared Zara's distinctive bone structure, the same unusual eye placement. He looked at her with an expression that mixed relief and exasperation. Zara met his gaze with a small smile. "Hello, father," she said, like she'd seen him yesterday rather than having been missing for months. The words hung in the air, rearranging everything Marcus thought he knew about his quiet companion. The prisoner was royalty. The technician was the architect of an empire's technology. The woman who'd chosen to stay and fix their environmental controls was someone whose absence could make star systems consider rebellion. The galaxy didn't just shift. It rebuilt itself around that simple greeting. All the strange moments fell into place. Her calm during the pirate attack, her ability to upgrade their systems, her casual mastery of technology nobody should understand. She hadn't been hiding her skills. She'd been using them on a scale so small, so ordinary that nobody recognized what they were seeing until her father arrived with an entire diplomatic delegation to ask about turnip yields and coffee machine repairs. The Altarian Emperor stood where pirate ships had been hours earlier, his robe seeming to drink the light from the colony's harsh floodlights. He called Zara his daughter, but the title carried more weight than blood relations. Marcus learned she hadn't just designed their fleet propulsion systems, she'd architected their entire technological infrastructure, from neural networks coordinating planetary defenses to the quantum communication protocols that held their empire together. She wasn't merely royalty. She was the chief scientist whose absence triggered governance crises across 3 star systems. The science directorate had become non-functional without her oversight. Military councils threatened retaliatory strikes over disputes they couldn't resolve without her technical assessments. Her father's stress lines weren't just paternal worry. They were the visible strain of an empire missing its central processing unit. Her casual frontier life suddenly made terrifying sense. The woman who got excited about turnip yields and coffee machine repairs was the same person who'd solved the unified field theory and created artificial intelligence systems that ran entire sectors. She treated interstellar policy with the same practical focus she applied to fixing environmental controls, as systems that could be optimized, improved, made more efficient. Political science research shows how individual intellects can anchor entire civilizations. Some systems concentrate so much expertise in single individuals that their absence creates structural weaknesses. The Altarian Empire hadn't just lost a brilliant scientist. They'd lost the person who understood how all their systems interconnected, who could see patterns nobody else recognized. Her disappearance didn't just slow progress, it threatened stability. Her father's request for her return came with implications for galactic equilibrium. Without her guidance, technological development had stalled. Military strategies became reactive rather than predictive. The Empire needed its chief scientist back not for sentimental reasons, but because their entire governance model depended on her unique cognitive capabilities. Marcus watched her transformation from fugitive to linchpin of interstellar power. The woman in stained work clothes became, in that moment, someone who held entire star systems in her mind. Her casual demeanor didn't change, but its meaning did. That calm wasn't innocence, it was the confidence of someone who'd designed faster than light, travel and could troubleshoot coffee makers with equal focus. The payoff arrived when she explained why she'd chosen their struggling colony. Empires are just large systems with poor efficiency ratings, she said. They waste resources on bureaucracy and protocol. Here I can see the results of my work immediately. When I fix something, people sleep better at night. Their children are healthier. Their defenses actually work. Her true identity reframed everything about her influence. The quiet upgrades to their systems weren't just clever fixes. They were demonstrations of how an entire civilization could operate, if designed by someone who prioritized function over form, efficiency over tradition. She hadn't been hiding who she was. She'd been showing them what was possible. But between you and me, empire building looks different when you've personally recalibrated the coffee makers and know exactly how much power the water recyclers waste. Zara's perspective wasn't theoretical. It was hands-on, practical, grounded in the immediate reality of making things work better for everyone around her. Her father saw an empire that needed its chief scientist back. She saw a colony that needed its systems optimized and its coffee made drinkable. Both were true, but only one involved getting her hands dirty with actual soil samples and machinery grease. Zara looked at her father, then at the colony spread out behind him. The Altarian ships gleamed under the system's star, while New Geneva's patchwork habitats hummed with the quiet improvements she'd made. The Empire needed her back to stabilize their technological edge. 3 star systems threatened secession. The military council demanded retaliatory strikes. The science directorate had become non-functional without her oversight. Stability required her return. She shook her head. "I want to be someone who gets excited about turnips," she said. The words hung in the air, simple and definitive. Her father stared, the intricate patterns on his robe seeming to tighten around him. Her definition of ordinary wasn't about simplicity, it was about scale. Fixing coffee makers mattered because people drank coffee every morning. Defending a small colony meant protecting specific faces, specific lives. Improving turnip yields put food on specific tables. She wasn't rejecting her intellect. She was redirecting it toward immediate, tangible impact. A galaxy-spanning mind became a human-scale agent of care. Psychological research suggests that gifted individuals often seek environments where their contributions produce visible, personal results rather than abstract, large-scale effects. The desire isn't to escape responsibility but to experience the satisfaction of direct connection. Zara could design propulsion systems for warships, but she preferred recalibrating environmental controls so a child could breathe easier at night. Her insistence on personal agency complicated imperial expectations. The Altarian delegation had come for their chief scientist, their problem solver, their strategic asset. They found someone who valued coffee machine repairs over interstellar policy. The tension wasn't between importance and triviality, it was between different definitions of what mattered. She chose to be extraordinary on her own terms, measuring success by improved crop yields and better air quality, rather than territorial expansion or technological dominance. The payoff arrived when she explained her reasoning. "Defending one colony matters more than propping up an empire," she said. "Here, I see the results. I know the people. The work connects. Heroism became something chosen rather than imposed, defined by care rather than conquest." She wasn't abandoning her capabilities. She was applying them where they felt most meaningful. Then she turned back toward the greenhouses, where the turnip experiments needed checking, and the coffee maker in the common area still needed its pressure settings adjusted. The ordinary tasks awaited, each one a choice that reinforced her redefinition of value and purpose. The Empire would have to learn to function without its chief scientist, because she'd found something more compelling than galactic stability. The immediate, tangible satisfaction of making a small community work better for everyone in it. 10 hegemony battleships materialized around Kepler 442b, their hulls gleaming with corporate logos instead of military insignia. They positioned themselves in perfect blockade formation, weapon systems active but not yet charging. Their flags showed the interlaced rings of a mining consortium that had recently branched into asset acquisition and security. The message they broadcast was polite, legalistic, and utterly terrifying. They wished to purchase the colony's advanced alien technology. The setup was corporate coercion disguised as a business transaction. They'd analyzed the pirate engagement data, seen the impossible defense patterns, and concluded New Geneva possessed captured alien tech worth acquiring. Their offer mentioned a generous purchase price and relocation assistance for current residents. The subtext was clear: sell willingly or be removed. Their fusion of military power and corporate language created a new kind of threat, one that used contracts instead of declarations of war. Their posture tested the colony's resolve. Soldiers watched targeting lasers paint their defenses while corporate lawyers discussed acquisition terms over secure channels. The hegemony didn't threaten annihilation. They offered lucrative voluntary transfer, with implied consequences for non-compliance. They'd done this before to smaller colonies, offered money first, force second, always maintaining plausible deniability. Economic studies demonstrate that corporate entities frequently underestimate intellectual capital when assessing acquisition targets. They see technology as hardware to be owned, rather than expertise to be understood. The hegemony assumed they were buying captured alien systems, not the ongoing creative output of a singular mind. They wanted the product, not the producer. A fundamental miscalculation of where the real value resided. Zara watched their approach from the command center, her expression that of an engineer observing inefficient machinery. Their negotiation tactics follow predictable profit maximization patterns, she noted. They've allocated 70% of their fleet value to intimidation displays, rather than actual combat readiness. She spoke like someone reading a disappointing performance review. Meanwhile, she'd been preparing what she called a teaching aid. While the corporate battleships flashed their weapons and transmitted purchase offers, Zara was running simulations on the colony's upgraded systems. She wasn't planning counterattacks or designing new weapons. She was creating a demonstration, a carefully calibrated display of why force couldn't solve this particular problem. The resolution came when the hegemony's patience expired. Their commander announced they would commence asset verification procedures, corporate speak for boarding and seizure. Their shuttles launched toward the colony, escorted by fighter craft. That's when Zara activated her response. The shuttles didn't explode. They didn't lose power. Instead, they began performing perfect formation flying patterns, impossibly tight maneuvers that should have torn them apart. Their weapon systems discharged harmlessly into space in synchronized bursts that looked like fireworks. The fighter craft started broadcasting kindergarten-level arithmetic lessons on all channels. The hegemony's military corporate fusion relied on predictable responses, either submission or resistance. They weren't prepared for something that made their technology behave like trained pets. Their systems were functioning perfectly, just not as intended. The blockade ships found their targeting computers calculating pi to unprecedented digits instead of tracking defensive emplacements. Zara's defense upgrades became a diplomatic tool rather than a weapon. She'd created a situation where aggression was literally impossible. Their own systems refused to cooperate with violent intentions. The corporate commanders faced a choice: continue being humiliated by their own equipment or negotiate properly. The teaching aid worked. After 20 minutes of their ships pirouetting through space and broadcasting educational content, the hegemony recalled their craft and requested actual negotiations. They'd learned that some assets couldn't be acquired through force, because the real value wasn't in the technology itself, but in the mind that understood how to make technology behave in ways nobody anticipated. Zara transmitted on all fleet channels at once, her voice carrying the same calm she used when discussing coffee recipes. She faced 3 separate armadas: human defense forces, Altarian imperial ships, and the hegemony corporate fleet, without changing her expression. "I will explain this once," and she began, "because repetition wastes energy better spent on useful things." The words weren't threatening. They were factual, like a teacher starting a lesson. Her message established non-negotiable boundaries with surgical precision. She didn't issue threats or ultimatums. She described physical limitations, the maximum safe approach distance, the energy thresholds their weapons could not exceed, the communication protocols that would be tolerated. Each parameter was stated as simple reality, like listing the boiling point of water or the speed of light. The rules weren't negotiable because physics wasn't negotiable. Then she demonstrated. Space around the colony shimmered, not with weapons, fire, or shields, but with geometry that shouldn't exist. Angles folded in ways that hurt to look at. Light curved back on itself. Multi-dimensional fields manifested as visible distortions in reality, showing what happened when someone manipulated fundamental forces without concern for conventional limitations. The display wasn't destructive, it was educational, showing the consequences of violating the boundaries she'd just described. Physics research confirms that demonstrations often educate more effectively than threats. Showing the actual limits of force makes abstract dangers tangible. The fleets witnessed capabilities that redefined possible military engagement. Their weapons didn't malfunction, they became irrelevant. Their tactics seemed childish against someone who could rewrite local physical constants. The corporate ships that had seemed so formidable now looked like toys next to reality itself bending to someone's will. Zara's approach refused to tolerate aggression against a community that wouldn't be bullied. She wasn't conquering or dominating. She was establishing equilibrium through understanding. The demonstration showed that force couldn't win here not because they lacked power, but because power itself worked differently around New Geneva. The colony had become a place where the normal rules of conflict didn't apply. Not through superior weapons, but through superior understanding. The 3 fleets watched as their own sensor readings showed impossible data. Ships appeared in multiple places at once, time dilated in localized pockets. Energy signatures behaved in ways that contradicted known physics. The demonstration wasn't attacking them. It was educating them about the futility of attack. They weren't facing superior force. They were facing someone who understood force better than they understood anything. The resolution arrived quietly. The hegemony corporate ships were the first to request withdrawal. Their transmission carried none of the earlier arrogance. Just a formal request to depart and never experience that again. The human and Altarian forces stood down, their commanders suddenly understanding why this small colony had become unassailable. Zara's demonstration had educated rather than intimidated, creating a stable equilibrium where threats became meaningless. The corporate ships withdrew, their commanders chastened not by defeat but by education. They'd learned that some problems couldn't be solved with force, because the real power lay in understanding how force actually worked. Their weapons and contracts and threats were tools for a universe that played by simpler rules, rules that didn't apply here. They left not because they'd been beaten, but because they'd been shown something they couldn't comprehend and didn't want to experience twice. Then New Geneva returned to its quiet routine, the impossible geometry fading from space like a chalkboard being erased. The colony had been defended without a single shot fired, without any destruction, without anything except a clear demonstration of why aggression was the least effective solution available. The fleets departed with a new understanding of power, one that valued knowledge over violence, education over intimidation. New Geneva became the galaxy's most unlikely center of learning, almost overnight. The shift started subtly, a research vessel from a species nobody recognized requesting landing clearance, then a diplomatic envoy from another system, then 3 more within the same week. The colony's comms system, which had once struggled with basic colony-wide announcements, now handled cross-species translation, protocols and encrypted scientific data streams without anyone noticing the upgrade. Researchers and diplomats arrived with questions about everything from soil composition to defense systems. They didn't come to conquer or trade, they came to learn. The colony's transformation from remote outpost to intellectual hub required new frameworks that nobody had planned for. Housing allocations needed redesigning for non-human physiologies. Atmosphere processors required adjustments for respiratory differences. The mess hall started serving 12 variations of what passed for food across different species. Zara cultivated a role that blended scientific leadership with public diplomacy. She'd spend mornings troubleshooting irrigation systems with agricultural researchers, afternoons explaining quantum field theory to puzzled ambassadors, and evenings recalibrating the coffee makers, because nobody else understood the precise pressure adjustments needed. Her approach wasn't hierarchical. She treated everyone from master physicists to junior botanists as colleagues facing interesting problems. Together, the Altarian Empire's official recognition arrived as a data packet encrypted with mathematics nobody else could decode. It granted New Geneva status as an independent research institution with full diplomatic immunity and access to scientific exchange programs. The designation provided legal protections that made the colony nearly invulnerable to external threats, a necessary development, given how many eyes were now watching this previously insignificant world. Political analysis shows how small entities can gain protection through intellectual capital rather than military strength. Knowledge became the colony's primary currency in defense. Their reputation for solving impossible problems attracted more brilliant minds, which in turn generated more valuable insights, creating a self-reinforcing cycle of influence. The colony didn't need warships when it had the galaxy's best problem solvers working together. Zara's directorship created legal frameworks specifically designed to protect cross-species collaboration. She drafted agreements that ensured knowledge sharing wouldn't become knowledge theft, that cultural exchange respected all parties' boundaries, that research benefits would be distributed fairly. These frameworks became models for other interspecies initiatives, slowly changing how civilizations interacted across the galaxy. Vendors and researchers brought resources that expanded the colony's capabilities in unexpected ways. A species with biotechnology expertise improved their agricultural yields. Another contributed material science advances that strengthened their infrastructure. The colony's capabilities grew not through conquest or trade deals, But through voluntary contributions from those who valued what was being built there, the payoff arrived gradually, a systemic shift in how knowledge and governance were shared across civilizations. New Geneva became a neutral meeting point for interspecies negotiations, a place where conflicts were resolved through problem-solving rather than force. The colony demonstrated that intellectual collaboration could achieve what military posturing could not, creating stability through shared understanding rather than imposed power. But between you and me, nobody expected the tribute vault to yield a diplomatic revolution. That moment when Marcus chose the fragile-looking prisoner seemed like a small act of mercy, not the beginning of a galactic transformation. The vault was supposed to contain spoils of war, not seeds of a new interstellar order. Yet here they were, hosting diplomats and researchers from dozens of species, all because one soldier made what he thought was the compassionate choice, and one prisoner decided to fix things instead of escape them. Marcus noticed the changes without understanding their source. The colony's air felt different, not just cleaner but somehow lighter, as if the atmosphere itself had been tuned to a more harmonious frequency. People seemed sharper, calmer. Arguments that would have sparked into shouting matches now resolved with quiet discussion. He wrote it off as collective relief after surviving multiple crises. But the pattern was too consistent to be coincidence. The atmospheric processors, which Zara had quietly recalibrated weeks earlier, did more than filter air. They released trace elements that improved cognitive function and reduced stress hormones. The effect was subtle but cumulative. Better focus, clearer thinking, lower anxiety. Colonists didn't feel artificially enhanced. They just felt more like their best selves. The air was scientifically better than original specifications, though nobody had run the tests to confirm it. Then came the wedding luck device. Zara built it for a couple whose marriage had been struggling under colony pressures. She called it applied quantum relationship counseling, a localized probability enhancement field that gently nudged circumstances toward positive outcomes. Small misunderstandings resolved before escalating. Forgotten anniversaries got remembered. Shared laughter occurred more frequently. The device didn't force emotions. It simply made harmony slightly more probable, like tilting a table so rolling dice land on better numbers. Social science research indicates that technology can significantly improve quality of life when guided by ethical principles rather than profit or control. The goal becomes well-being rather than efficiency, human connection rather than productivity. Zara's approach treated technology as a tool for nurturing relationships, not optimizing output. Her improvements made people happier, not just more productive. Her problem-solving mindset migrated into the most intimate spaces of colony life. She adjusted the emergency alert system, replacing the previous alarm, scientifically proven to increase stress hormones, with a melodic tone that stimulated focus and calm determination. She recalibrated Farmer Chen's irrigation system to emit specific frequency patterns that improved his turnip yields without chemical additives. Each intervention was small, practical, and respectfully implemented. Technology became a means for improving daily existence rather than extending power. The colony's systems didn't just work better, they made life better. Medical scanners provided more accurate diagnoses, while also making patients feel more at ease. Communication systems transmitted clearer messages while reducing miscommunication conflicts. Even the lighting in common areas was adjusted to circadian rhythms, improving sleep patterns and mood. The payoff arrived in the quiet moments. A mechanic fixed a broken generator without swearing. Two researchers from different species collaborated on a project without cultural misunderstandings. A child solved a math problem that had stumped her yesterday. Progress became intimate, ethical, and deeply personal. Zara refused to treat people as resources to be optimized, instead using her capabilities to create an environment where everyone could thrive. Then the coffee started tasting better. Not different or stronger, but perfectly balanced. Each cup consistently excellent without anyone adjusting the brewer. The change was so noticeable that colonists began leaving thank you notes near the machine. They didn't know who to thank, but they understood the improvement wasn't accidental. The coffee became a small daily reminder that someone was paying attention to their comfort, that their well-being mattered to whatever intelligence guided their systems. Between you and me, the real revolution wasn't in the defense systems or diplomatic recognition. It was in the air they breathed, the relationships that flourished, the coffee that tasted exactly right. Zara's genius had diffused into their everyday happiness without demanding anything in return, without turning their lives into data points or their choices into algorithms. She'd built a world where technology served people instead of people serving technology, and the result was a community that felt like home. Marcus looked out over New Geneva from the observation deck. The colony had become something unrecognizable. Research vessels from a dozen species docked at expanded ports, the glow of energy-efficient habitats spreading across the valley, the quiet hum of systems working better than their designers intended, all this from what he'd thought was a simple act of mercy in a tribute vault months earlier. He'd chosen the fragile-looking prisoner, expecting to protect someone vulnerable. Instead, he'd gotten Zara, who turned their struggling outpost into a galactic hub through sheer intellect and quiet determination. His assumption about strength had been wrong from the beginning. Real power wasn't in weapons or intimidation. It was in understanding how things worked and making them work better. Psychological research confirms that small moral choices often have large unintended consequences. A decision made for compassionate reasons can trigger cascading effects that reshape entire systems. Marcus's choice to take Zara seemed insignificant at the time. Just one soldier avoiding the shame of taking trophies from a war he wanted to forget. That choice saved their civilization from pirates, corporate intimidation, and its own limitations. Their relationship became the catalyst for transformation. Marcus provided the stability that allowed Zara's capabilities to flourish. She provided the intellect that saved them all. The initial dynamic, soldier and prisoner, protector and protected, had reversed completely. She became the architect of their salvation, while he learned to appreciate strengths he hadn't known to look for. Zara's influence redefined what counted as value in their world. Weapons became less important than wisdom. Military power mattered less than problem-solving ability. The colony's worth wasn't in its defenses but in its knowledge, its collaborations, its ability to improve lives through applied intelligence. Strength became something measured in solutions rather than force. The payoff arrived when Marcus realized his act of mercy had bound their fates in ways that reshaped galactic politics. That moment in the tribute vault wasn't just about choosing a prisoner, it was about choosing a different future. One where compassion led to unexpected advantages, where intellect trumped violence, where the apparently weak option became the strongest strategic move. He remembered Zara's observation that stupid decisions often turn out to be the most interesting ones. His choice had seemed foolish at the time, taking the least valuable prize, the person everyone else overlooked. That decision created ripples across star systems, turning a quiet colony into a center of learning and a model for interstellar cooperation. The narrative subverted expectations completely. The prize became the key to their survival. The prisoner became the architect. The mercy choice became the strategic masterpiece. Marcus's initial desire to avoid profiting from war had yielded greater benefits than any weapon or technology could have provided. True strength revealed itself as adaptability, empathy, and intellectual curiosity. The ability to improve coffee makers mattered as much as designing fleet propulsion systems. Fixing environmental controls carried the same weight as diplomatic negotiations. Value wasn't hierarchical. It was practical, immediate, and deeply human, which means sometimes the weakest choice is actually the strongest move. Picking the fragile prisoner over the advanced weapon seemed like conceding advantage. Instead, it became their greatest advantage, the decision that saved their colony, transformed their future, and demonstrated that power often resides where least expected. The tribute vault offered obvious prizes, but the real treasure was the mind everyone overlooked. Zara described herself with the precision of a technical manual: brilliant, dangerous, occasionally catastrophic, and absolutely devoted to improving coffee brewing technology. The words weren't boastful or self-deprecating, just factual, like reading specifications off a datasheet. She claimed this identity while elbow-deep in the colony's main coffee machine, her hands busy with recalibration tools as she spoke. Her self-positioning proclaimed that identity could be negotiated and celebrated, rather than inherited or imposed. She wasn't denying her capabilities or her past. She was choosing how to apply them, what to value, who to become. The woman who could design interstellar propulsion systems had decided that perfecting coffee mattered just as much. This wasn't a rejection of her intellect. It was a redefinition of its purpose. Identity research shows how self-definition empowers individuals in constrained systems. When people choose their own labels rather than accepting assigned roles, they gain agency over their lives and contributions. Zara wasn't just the Altarian Empire's chief scientist anymore. She was someone who fixed coffee makers and defended colonies and got excited about turnip yields. She built her identity around what she valued, not what others expected. She was all these things by choice for the first time in her life. Her brilliance had always been a fact, but how she used it had been dictated by imperial demands and emergency situations. Now she chose when to be dangerous, when to be brilliant, when to focus on catastrophic possibilities, and when to focus on coffee temperature. The freedom wasn't in having capabilities, it was in deciding their application. Her definition of ordinary coexisted with extraordinary intellect through conscious choice. She didn't see repairing coffee makers as beneath her capabilities. She saw it as another interesting problem to solve. The same mind that could manipulate quantum fields could also determine the ideal water pressure for espresso extraction. She refused to create hierarchies where some work mattered more than other work. Everything was worth doing well. Her partnership with Marcus represented choose and be chosen rather than conquest. They hadn't been assigned to each other by military protocol or political arrangement. He'd picked her from the tribute vault thinking he was being kind. She'd chosen to stay because she found something worth building. Their relationship became a series of mutual choices rather than obligations, a partnership built on respect rather than power dynamics. She bound her capabilities to a shared dream rather than imperial demands. The Altarian Empire wanted her strategic mind applied to their expansion and defense. She wanted her mind applied to making New Geneva work better for everyone living there. The scale was smaller, but the impact was immediate. She could see the results of her work in people's daily lives, in their comfort and safety and happiness. The payoff arrived in how she summarized herself, not as a list of achievements or titles, but as a collection of capabilities and interests that she'd chosen to value. Her identity became something flexible and self-determined rather than fixed and externally imposed. She demonstrated that who you are can be negotiated, that labels can be chosen, that value isn't determined by scale or importance but by meaning and connection. Then she went back to fixing the coffee maker, because some revolutions are delicious. The real change wasn't in galactic politics or defense systems. It was in a colony where the coffee tasted perfect every morning, where people felt seen and valued, where extraordinary capabilities served ordinary happiness. The machine hummed to life under her hands, delivering another small improvement to daily life, another choice made manifest. New Geneva's transformation from vulnerable outpost to defensible, diplomatically protected community offered something more valuable than weapons or territory, a working template for interstellar coexistence. The impossible stopped being a threat and became a frontier awaiting patient exploration. Their story argued that real strength wasn't measured by firepower, but by the courage to choose a better future, even when the obvious choices pointed toward familiar patterns of conflict and control. Imagination paired with capability, guided by care for others, redefined what civilizations could become. Their experience demonstrated that interstellar cultures could learn to coexist through collaboration rather than conquest. Researchers from dozens of species now worked alongside colonists, sharing knowledge without demanding ownership, solving problems that no single culture could handle alone. Futurism studies confirm that small communities often model large-scale civilizational change more effectively than centralized governments. New Geneva became a living experiment in cross-species cooperation, its successes and failures providing data points for broader galactic diplomacy. The colony showed that progress could happen through voluntary participation rather than forced integration, through shared goals rather than imposed solutions. Zara's approach demonstrated that power could educate as well as intimidate. Her response to the corporate fleet hadn't been to destroy them, but to teach them why aggression was ineffective. She'd used their own technology to demonstrate the limits of force, creating a lesson that resonated across star systems. Power became something to understand rather than simply wield. Their partnership proved ordinary life could coexist with extraordinary intellect. Marcus's ground-level practicality combined with Zara's theoretical brilliance created a balance that served the entire community. The colony didn't become a laboratory or military installation. It remained a place where people grew turnips, raised families, and complained about the weather. Extraordinary capabilities served ordinary happiness. The payoff arrived in the quiet realization that anything became possible when people chose kindness, curiosity, and collaboration over conquest. New Geneva's defense systems worked because they'd been designed to protect rather than attack. Their diplomatic influence grew because they offered solutions rather than demands. Their scientific advancements spread because they shared knowledge freely. The template they created wasn't about replicating their specific systems, but about adopting their approach. Other colonies began experimenting with similar models, focusing on intellectual capital over military spending, collaboration over competition, quality of life over territorial expansion. The galaxy didn't unify under a single government. It diversified through countless small communities finding their own paths forward. Marcus sometimes walked through the research quarter, listening to scientists from different species debating quantum mechanics in one breath and coffee recipes in the next. The ordinary and extraordinary had blended into something new, a civilization that valued both perfect espresso and perfect mathematics, that saw no contradiction between advanced physics and agricultural innovation. Their story suggested that frontiers weren't just places to be conquered but possibilities to be understood. The unknown became less threatening when approached with curiosity rather than weapons. First contact protocols shifted from military preparedness to scientific curiosity, from defense preparations to translation exercises. The colony's growth proved that small groups could influence large systems not through force but through demonstration. Their success attracted imitation not because they compelled it, but because it worked better. Communities that collaborated thrived. Those that insisted on conquest found themselves increasingly isolated in a galaxy, learning to value knowledge over territory. But between you and me, they're still working on that coffee recipe. The perfect cup remained elusive, sometimes too bitter, sometimes too weak, always requiring just one more adjustment. The quest continued, a small reminder that some problems required endless curiosity rather than final solutions. That improvement mattered more than perfection, and that the most ordinary pleasures could occupy the most extraordinary minds. Marcus's choice in the tribute vault sent ripples through galactic politics that neither of them could have predicted. What seemed like a minor moral decision, selecting the weakest-looking prisoner out of pity, set an unexpected journey in motion. The war had ended, the spoils were being divided, and he wanted no part of the flashy weapons or advanced tech. He chose what he thought was the merciful option. It felt small, personal. It wasn't. Zara became his guide and catalyst, not a mere companion. Each interaction peeled back another layer of her true nature, forcing Marcus to reevaluate what power really looked like. She didn't command armies or issue threats. She recalibrated sensors, asked questions about human customs, fixed coffee makers. Her influence was quiet, almost invisible, until it wasn't. His assumptions about mercy and being the chosen one were constantly challenged. He thought he was the protector, the one making the generous gesture. She showed him that strength wasn't about who held the weapon, but who understood how the weapon worked and whether it needed to be used at all. Sociology confirms that individual relationships can seed systemic change. A single connection, built on unexpected respect, can alter the course of communities, even civilizations. Her subtle interventions were like tremors before an earthquake. Fixing environmental controls seemed minor until the air itself seemed clearer, easier to breathe. Adjusting comm systems felt technical until misunderstandings between colonists dropped noticeably. Upgrading medical scanners was practical until survival rates improved. Each small fix foreshadowed the larger impact to come, the quiet colony becoming an unassailable fortress, a diplomatic hub, a center of learning. The twist, of course, was that the prize became the architect of their salvation. Marcus had chosen a prisoner. What he got was a strategist, a scientist, a diplomat, and a mechanic, all wrapped in one unassuming package. She didn't need rescuing. She needed opportunity, and she used it to redesign their world from the ground up, turning vulnerability into strength through intellect and empathy. Their story demonstrates that true power often resides in the mind and the heart, not in physical prowess or military dominance. It lives in the ability to understand systems, to see patterns others miss, to care enough to improve things for everyone, not just the powerful. Zara never fired a weapon, but she neutralized entire fleets. She never commanded soldiers, but she unified species. She never sought control, but she shaped the future. Then they realized sometimes the reward chooses you back with interest. Marcus gave Zara a chance at life outside a cell. She gave him and his colony a chance at a future none of them dreamed was possible. The ripple became a wave, and the wave changed the shoreline of galactic politics forever. It turned out the most strategic decision wasn't made in a war room. It was made in a tribute vault, by a tired soldier who chose kindness over conquest and in doing so, won more than he ever imagined. The tribute vault choice that seemed like simple mercy became strategic brilliance when Zara revealed her true capabilities. Their story proves strength isn't about weapons or intimidation. It redefines itself through intellect, adaptability, and consciously chosen partnership. Sometimes the weakest-looking option yields the strongest future when guided by genuine curiosity and care for others. Marcus thought he was choosing compassion over strategy. Instead, he discovered that in the right hands, compassion becomes the ultimate strategy, one that builds rather than destroys, that unites rather than divides, that turns prisoners into partners and outposts into beacons.